At exactly 2 p.m. local time in Geneva, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi sat down at the negotiating table. The Iranian diplomat arranged official documents and projected a posture of defiance, but the Iranian foreign minister did not know the Iranian delegation was participating in an autopsy. The foreign minister was completely unaware that the ultimate Iranian bargaining chips were already entombed under thousands of tons of shattered concrete. The United States military had just concluded a devastating 12-day operation. American strike aircraft dropped bunker-buster bombs on 3 primary Iranian nuclear facilities, effectively halting the entire Iranian nuclear program in a matter of minutes. The diplomatic summit in Switzerland was never a negotiation. The Geneva meeting was a desperate capitulation masked as diplomacy driven by a total systemic collapse back in Tehran. The absolute destruction of these nuclear sites was a foregone conclusion based on pure technological asymmetry. To execute the strikes, the United States deployed the GBU-57AB massive ordnance penetrator. Think of this American weapon as a flying freight train constructed from solid steel designed to obliterate deep-buried targets. The American munitions struck the Iranian facilities at exactly Mach 2.4, slicing through reinforced earth with millimeter precision. Meanwhile, the Iranian regime relied on underground fortresses constructed with substandard Wish.com concrete mixes. When the American kinetic energy transferred into the ground, that inferior Iranian concrete instantly crumbled at pressure thresholds 60% lower than basic American industrial standards. The outcome was instantaneous and catastrophic for the Iranian military. 400 kilograms of highly enriched Iranian uranium are now permanently buried under an impenetrable mountain of rubble. The recent Iranian offer to dilute that radioactive material is nothing more than pathetic bureaucratic theater. Because the uranium is physically unreachable, the United States strike crews did not even flinch during the bombing runs. The American pilots operated with absolute clinical calm, securing total dominance, while the Iranian leadership watched decades of nuclear ambition vaporize in a single afternoon. The United States aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford did not simply deploy to the Mediterranean Sea to look intimidating. The American supercarrier arrived as an absolute apex predator carrying advanced sensors that immediately dominated the electromagnetic spectrum. The ship's ANSPY-4 active electronically scanned array radars immediately activated across the combat theater. Think of these American sensor networks as massive digital vacuum cleaners, quietly sucking up every single electronic emission radiating from the Iranian coastline. Down on the surface, the Iranian Bavar 373 air defense radars desperately attempted to track the incoming American assets. The Iranian radar operators initiated 14 distinct attempts to lock onto United States electronic warfare aircraft. Because the Iranian hardware was running on obsolete 1990s Russian-derived technology, every single targeting sequence failed completely. The Iranian defensive systems hallucinated phantom contacts, dropping their tracking locks in exactly 3.4 seconds during every single engagement. The American jamming pods easily overwhelmed the primitive Iranian processors, rendering the Iranian airspace entirely defenseless. This catastrophic technological failure was entirely inevitable. The Iranian state-owned enterprises prioritize extreme political loyalty over basic engineering talent. That systemic corruption drives every competent scientist out of the Iranian military-industrial complex, creating a massive brain drain to the private sector and leaving behind a hollow shell incapable of matching American innovation. Free markets produce true technological dominance, while authoritarian command economies structurally cannot produce anything more than cheap copies that predictably fail under extreme pressure. The United States intelligence community documented that this specific confrontation was not an isolated incident. This was the 5th documented instance since 2020 where the exact same Iranian Bavar radar system completely collapsed when exposed to basic American jamming protocols. The Iranian military simply cannot learn from their systematic failures because admitting weakness within an authoritarian regime triggers deadly political purges. In a desperate display of flailing, the Iranian military launched a second consecutive day of retaliatory strikes using ballistic missiles. The Iranian leadership mistakenly believed they were projecting formidable regional power to the global community. Instead, the Iranian missile launch was a completely voluntary intelligence gift. Every single Iranian rocket that left the launch pad was instantly stripped of its deepest secrets. The American naval sensors mapped the exact Iranian launch trajectories, logged the specific rocket motor burn rates, and intercepted the primitive guidance frequencies in real time. The Iranian aggression was never a legitimate military threat. The Iranian aggression was simply an involuntary contribution to American targeting databases. The Iranian forces were essentially providing their own defeat instructions to the United States Navy. Aboard the American warships, United States AEGIS radar operators calmly monitored the incoming ballistic threats. These American sailors undergo 2,400 hours of rigorous technical training, surviving a grueling 14-month selection pipeline with a 73% washout rate. The American crews watched the tactical screens with complete boredom, probably discussing lunch plans, while the Iranian missile commanders, selected solely for regime loyalty rather than tactical competence, panicked in their underground silos. The American crews did not view the Iranian missiles as a genuine military threat for even a fraction of a second. The American operators simply thanked the Iranian military for providing free tutorial data on their own critical vulnerabilities, waiting patiently as the enemy unknowingly compromised an entire generation of their own strategic weapons systems. The Iranian retaliation was absolutely not a military threat to American forces. The Iranian missile launch was a voluntary intelligence gift that caused their own archaic systems to literally defeat themselves through sheer overexertion. Down on the ground, the internal components of the Iranian Bavar 373 air defense radars began melting at exactly 450 degrees Celsius. The obsolete Iranian hardware was straining far beyond its design parameters just to track American Phantom radar contacts. Systemic pressure levels plummeted instantly. Hydraulic fluid boiled within the cooling lines. Internal electronic linkages physically severed under the extreme thermal load. The primary Iranian radar locks collapsed in precisely 3.4 seconds during every single engagement attempt. The mechanical degradation was absolute and cascading, resulting in exactly 0 successful targeting solutions across 14 distinct firing sequences. The Iranian hardware was physically tearing itself apart, blowing out transmission seals and overloading power grids, while the United States sensor networks passively logged exactly 2,400 terabytes of raw telemetry data. The financial reality of this technological humiliation is utterly staggering. The Iranian regime burned exactly $42 million worth of ballistic missiles simply to strike empty desert terrain. In exchange for that massive Iranian expenditure, the United States military extracted $8.4 billion worth of actionable signals intelligence, acquiring a complete map of the Iranian strategic architecture for the mere cost of standard aviation fuel. This is the pure economics of sheer desperation, where an incompetent authoritarian system completely bankrupts itself merely to provide free targeting data to its greatest adversary. This operational catastrophe on the battlefield perfectly explains the ongoing diplomatic theater. The Iranian delegation in Geneva stubbornly refused to discuss their ballistic missile programs, attempting to project leverage that simply does not exist. That diplomatic refusal is entirely laughable when their prized missile systems are currently melting down and self-destructing on their own launch pads. In response to this flailing Iranian aggression, the United States executed the absolute largest military buildup in the Middle East region since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The United States repositioned heavy warships to the Israeli coastline and saturated the entire combat theater with overwhelming aerial dominance. This massive American force projection is absolutely not a defensive posture. The United States is not preparing to defend itself against Iranian attacks. This deployment is the physical manifestation of an executioner's block strategically constructed to ensure the Iranian leadership thoroughly understands their absolute powerlessness before the final blow is delivered. The situation degraded so rapidly for the Iranian military that the Omani mediator desperately contacted the Iranian foreign minister to urge an immediate ceasefire. The Iranian armed forces are currently facing total operational degradation across every single combat domain. Every Iranian escalation attempt only exposes additional systemic vulnerabilities, proving that their absolute maximum military effort is completely inadequate against American imperial dominance. The American naval and air forces simply maintain their holding patterns, comfortably observing from above while watching the Iranian military collapse under the weight of its own strategic incompetence. The entire 12-day confrontation and the subsequent diplomatic charade in Geneva were never about reaching a mutual agreement. The global community watched a regional war, but the United States military executed a meticulously orchestrated massive data-gathering operation. The Iranian regime genuinely believed they were defending their sovereign territory, while the American armed forces were simply cataloging every single vulnerability for future weaponization. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group did not just repel the Iranian retaliatory strikes. The American sensor networks logged exactly 2,400 terabytes of raw telemetry data. The United States intelligence apparatus documented every single Iranian frequency hopping pattern in exquisite high-definition detail. The American electronic warfare aircraft recorded the exact thermal signatures of the Iranian ballistic missiles from the moment of ignition. The American naval radar systems cataloged the precise mechanical failure rates of the Iranian air defenses under maximum stress. The United States reconnaissance platforms documented the exact response times of the Iranian command structure down to the millisecond. Every single desperate Iranian maneuver was systematically recorded, categorized, and permanently filed away in the United States targeting databases. The Iranian military was not fighting an adversary. The Iranian military was voluntarily submitting a comprehensive portfolio of their own fatal weaknesses. This permanent evidentiary record completely reframes the ongoing international negotiations. The technical expert teams scheduled to meet in Vienna are absolutely not there to negotiate a fair diplomatic settlement. The United States representatives arriving in Austria are highly trained intelligence operatives, and they are carrying the exact diagnostic data of the Iranian military collapse. The American operatives are walking into those meeting rooms to dictate the absolute terms of permanent Iranian nuclear disarmament. The Iranian negotiators will sit across the table completely stripped of any geopolitical leverage because the American delegation already possesses the exact thermal, electronic, and mechanical blueprints of the entire Iranian armed forces. The diplomatic talks are simply a formal reading of the Iranian death sentence, written with the very data the Iranian military voluntarily provided during their suicidal missile launches. The United States has built an irrefutable prosecution case meticulously documented in 1080p infrared video and pure telemetry readouts, ensuring that the Iranian regime can never memory hold their catastrophic humiliation. When this massive intelligence harvest is fully weaponized, the operational consequences for the Iranian regime will be absolute and irreversible. The staggering amount of data collected guarantees that any future Iranian military action will be defeated before it even begins. American electronic warfare systems would know exactly which Iranian communications frequencies to jam, severing their command networks before the Iranian operators even flip the switch. American targeting algorithms would know exactly where to aim, bypassing the shattered remnants of the Iranian air defense grid with absolute zero resistance. American tactical computers would know exactly how to outmaneuver the sluggish Iranian ballistic missiles, permanently rendering their entire strategic deterrent entirely useless. American stealth bombers would know exactly which underground bunkers possess substandard concrete, ensuring total destruction on the very first pass. American naval interceptors would know exactly how long the Iranian radar systems take to overheat, timing their counterstrikes for the exact second of maximum Iranian mechanical failure. American cyber warfare units would know exactly how to dismantle the Iranian logistical supply chains, starving their missile silos before the launch orders are ever received. This total information dominance is actively widening the power gap between the two nations every single hour. The United States military took the massive intelligence haul from this 12-day operation and incorporated these exact missile tracking lessons into live operational doctrine in exactly 14 days. The American tactical networks are already updated, patched, and actively hunting for the next engagement. Meanwhile, the Iranian military establishment remains completely paralyzed by devastating political purges and the absolute systemic inability to learn from their own catastrophic failures. The Iranian leadership cannot adapt because admitting that their billion-dollar missile systems were effortlessly dismantled by American sensors would result in immediate executions within their own ranks. The authoritarian system forces the Iranian generals to continuously repeat the exact same failures while the American war machine evolves in real time. This undeniable reality brings the current diplomatic standoff into sharp, unforgiving focus. United States President Donald Trump issued a strict 10 to 15-day deadline for total Iranian compliance. That executive mandate is absolutely not a flexible negotiation window designed for diplomatic compromise. That deadline is a highly calculated countdown to total systemic erasure. The massive American military buildup surrounding the Iranian borders is locked, loaded, and awaiting the final command. The 12-day strike already vaporized the Iranian nuclear ambition, and the retaliatory missile launches handed the United States the absolute keys to the Iranian kingdom. This entire confrontation proves the ultimate unchanging reality of the global hierarchy. The American imperial dominance remains completely uncontested, and the message to the Iranian leadership is definitively clear. Authoritarian regimes should stick to producing cheap domestic propaganda rather than attempting to challenge the most powerful military force in human history.